partially overdosed on it. And I remember the feeling of just like my body shutting down and getting cold and
Welcome back to the Open Up Podcast, everyone. It's episode 94, Stuart Watkins, and this is his intro that he said to use, yoga teacher and dad. My man. Good man with the blue eyes.
Yeah.
Beautiful blue eyes.
Oh, thank you, brother. Good to be here.
First question, straight off the bat, we're going deep. Could you please describe the way that you view yourself as a man and or human?
Yeah. Father. I love being a dad, so that is something I really identify with and take a lot of joy, and I'm super grateful to have two sweet little daughters. So yeah, I feel like I am a good, fun dad, for one. I'm a yoga teacher, so I really enjoy that, of bringing not just awareness into the yoga practice as such, but living a life in alignment, and honestly, and with integrity and connection. So I view myself as kind of a playful. People use the word authentic a lot. Yeah. I think I seem to be at ease in my body right now and just living an authentic life. So probably authenticity is what comes
amazing.
to me. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
This is a selfish question.
Sure.
Because I'm a dad as well, and I love being a dad.
Yeah.
Seeing as you touched on, like, being a dad being, I guess, an important or profound role within your life. Not to delve too deeply into your story, but how has becoming a dad changed your life and changed the person that you are?
Yeah. Massively, man. More than I ever thought possible. It's made me way more playful, for one. Kids have just that natural joy and spontaneity and playfulness. It's reignited that in me. It's made me kind of paradoxically not take life too seriously.
Yeah.
At the same time see the preciousness of life. So it's like taking life sincerely but not so seriously. It's like, oh wow, life is just precious. Seeing these little kids just innocent and radiant and playful. So it's like this sincerity of like, just got to cherish every day. At the same time, not taking it so fucking seriously, you know? Yeah. And just cherishing the moment, having a good old play, having a laugh, at the same time grabbing life by the balls, so to speak, and just going for it, you know? It's really taken that to another level. Yeah.
I want to know one from you as well, but I'll speak about one of the lessons that I've learnt with my daughter, and that is that I snap far too quickly. Yeah. So I get aggressive far too quickly, and it's something that I thought I'd worked through, and so when it arose again, I judged myself a lot, and therefore I guess kept that in. I didn't express it, and then I projected that anger out onto other people. And so one of the lessons that she's taught me is that I need to become a better person for her, because I snapped at her, made her cry and genuinely fearful, and it just broke my heart. It tore me apart inside to know that I did that to someone who's so innocent, such a beautiful soul. Is there a lesson that you can think of that jumps to mind first that you've learned?
Yeah, totally, man. And I can relate. It's like they're mirrors to us, you know? So if I'm like feeling snappy or just not present, grumpy, they magnify it straight away and kind of amplify it as well. That they, like if I'm not grounded and present or I'm just not feeling great, I'll be easily irritated by them for sure. So, I mean, that is my main yoga practice now, the yoga of parenting, you know, because they're these crystal clear mirrors, and if I'm not on my game, they'll show me, they'll tell me, they'll play up, they'll they'll be much more irritable and chuck tantrums. But I find it again and again and again, like if I'm in my heart and present and paying attention to them, they're sweet. And then I'm much more able to handle it when they're having a tantrum.
Yeah.
And I'm less irritated and less angry. So it's a constant reflection back to like where I'm at. So it's a practice of mindfulness, it's a practice of paying attention, of being honest with where I'm at. Yeah, it's awesome, but it can be challenging as well, you know, like it can be hard to be that honest about the situation and where we're at, and there they are, just totally clear, reflecting it all right back to us, you know. So it's just taking a good look at it.
I've never looked at it like that, so I'm going to take that on board.
Yeah, it's like looking at a mirror, you know, and it's a great reflection. Yeah.
Hey guys, just want to take a quick second to give you a word from our sponsors. Hopefully I'm wearing the same clothes I was back in that interview, but don't worry about it. We've got Made It Nutrition, that is plant-based supplements. They're all about the holistic lifestyle. They're all about the mind, body, and spirit, and they're doing that through their high-intensity bodyweight workouts as well as those plant-based supplements. Number 2 is CrossFit Long Haul, the Good Times Gym out in Maddington. Now what they do is they offer personal training. They obviously offer CrossFit group training, and they will tailor your nutrition plan to help you achieve your goals. And the reason that I've partnered with CrossFit Long Haul out there in Maddington is because I'm a friend of the owner. I know her, and she's all about that holistic approach as well, combining and intertwining the physical and the mental. So you'll be in good hands there. CrossFit Long Haul out in Maddington. Ciao. Let's dive right into your story, seeing as it starts around childhood. Are you happy walking us through?
Sure, yeah. So I had a great childhood, to be honest. It was a beautiful childhood, but there was this chronic anxiety. I was an anxious kid. I had a really hard time at school. I was just nervous about, I just remember every day feeling like sick with anxiety.
Wow.
Anxious to get shit wrong, anxious to lose, anxious of what people thought about me. And it was so strange because I was a pretty popular kid, good at sports and all that. You wouldn't think it would be the recipe for anxiety, but it was really bad. I remember going to the toilet and literally vomiting with anxiety, like pretty regularly. Just
wow.
like it was crap. It wasn't fun. And I remember getting to like year 6, 7 and being excited to go to high school so I could finally start smoking weed, because I became like around 9 or 10 became obsessed with grunge. I was deep in my grunge, Nirvana, Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, and so the kind of grungy, drug-taking, skateboarding, punky kind of scene was really romantic to me. It was really glorified. So I couldn't wait to finally get to high school and just be able to start making my own decisions and start to party, really. Like as soon as I got to high school, I was smoking weed for breakfast, during school. I'd wag school. We had a bong and bucket set up across the oval from our school, and we'd wag every day, really, every day. It was a rare day that we didn't wag, and go to the baseball nets and smoke buckets and just get so stoned and then go back to school. So that was, in retrospect, that was me like self-medicating this anxiety, because I started to not be so anxious, and I didn't give a shit, and wasn't doing good at school, but I didn't give a shit. All I was concerned about was going skateboarding, going surfing, listening to music, and getting high. And that got really bad. That I did go down a really deep, dark rabbit hole with that. Got to 14 and started taking harder drugs, a lot of speed and a lot of ecstasy and LSD and anything I could, you know. And it got really messy in the scene. Like people started getting really sick. Some people started going to like, there were a couple guys that ended up in like mental institutions through
Wow.
like apparently being on like permanent psychosis, like the drugs sending them into permanent psychosis. And it just got really messy. And yet I was loving it, you know. I did love it. I started going to raves, like drum and bass raves and these kind of gothic type raves, and it just got really dark, and the drug taking thing was just glorified. Like it was just normal just to get on these drug benders for days on end. And looking back, I was just a kid, you know. And kind of a blessing in disguise came up. It was shit at the time, but a blessing in disguise came up when I was 15. I remember it the memory kind of started coming back later. My memory was like wiped for a few months there. But what I think happened, and what apparently happened through what other people have said, is a few of us took this really bad type of ecstasy that had like special K in it and horse tranquilizers and heroin and I essentially like partially overdosed on it. And I remember the feeling of just like my body shutting down and getting cold, and the next thing I knew, I woke up in my room and just felt almost paralyzed, just this fog of depression and fatigue, and really locked myself in the room, dark room, for months. And it wasn't a fun time. It was crap. At the same time, I speak of the blessing in disguise, because during that time, I felt this kind of inspiration bubbling up in me. I started feeling like, all right, what felt like died. It felt like kind of several out-of-body experiences of like witnessing the body, and a lot of inspiration started coming in. And in that time, while I was in my bedroom for a period there, I started listening to Tony Robbins, and that sparked a chord. It sparked a real deep inspiration in me, and I just became obsessed with Tony Robbins and started journaling and like getting affirmative and pumped. At the same time, Dr. Wayne Dyer, his more spiritual take on it all, came into my life, and started getting interested in nutrition and strength training and stuff like that. So while I was in that kind of cave of what felt like really deep depression and kind of just paralyzed in the unknown, weirdly this kind of inspiration was bubbling. And literally when I finally was able to get back to school, again 15, like what the hell, I went from like prior to that time being this skinny, pale, I dyed my hair black at the time, like imagine like long black hair, like kind of Marilyn Manson style, Trent Reznor style. Didn't look good, just like didn't look healthy at all. I look back on photos and yeah, looked like a different person. And then I came back from that period and I'd started going to the gym and moving the body, and I'd researched how to eat well, so I was starting to feed the body well, and I turned up, literally people didn't recognize me. I was happy, I was inspired, I started doing good at school, I stopped smoking weed, I stopped taking all drugs, still to this day, you know. That was it. I kind of peaked early with my party times, and then came back just like pumped on life. It was amazing. It was like a rebirth. It was like I kind of like died in that time. In a way, it was like a spiritual death, and then came back just pumped and grateful and like had vitality like that I'd never felt. And it's like all that anxiety that I grew up with has gone as well. Like I didn't give a shit in a good way, you know. I didn't give a shit what people thought. I wasn't preoccupied judging other people as well. Like it just kind of killed a whole lot of that bullshit, and came back and wanted to learn and wanted to play sport again, because I gave up all sport and just became fixated on partying and skateboarding and surfing. Came back and just wanted to have proper friendships and wanted to just do good stuff, you know, not just waste my life away. So yeah, that was really my childhood into teenagehood.
Yeah.
That had a few variables, you know, it was charged times, you know.
That's a lot to deal with by 15.
It was a lot.
When you're talking about the drug use, I was thinking in my head, yep, cool, 19, 20, no.
Yeah, which is crazy, you know,
It
like
is.
when I look back and now have kids and that, like on the developing brain, you know, at young teens, I mean 12, 13, 14, and then like peaking at 14, 15, it's crazy.
Were you able to be open about your drug use, or was that something you had to hide?
No, I hid it, and I hid it very well. Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
It's, wearing that sort of mask takes a toll.
Yeah.
Do you have an understanding of how hiding that, which was something so prevalent in your life, impacted you moving forward?
No, because I got very honest about it later.
Okay.
So I definitely came to terms with it and kind of joke about it. I don't feel there's any hang-ups about it. When I talk about it with my parents, you know, they admit that they were just incredibly naive. Like they had maybe one puff of a joint their whole life, you know?
Yeah.
So didn't know the symptoms. They just thought I was a teenager going through, you know, the melancholy times that many teenagers do. And I guess I functioned pretty well, strangely. So I guess it's not like I was trying to hide it, because it's pretty fucking obvious.
Yeah.
But they just didn't know.
Yeah.
Not that they were negligent or anything. They were just incredibly naive, and admittedly, like it's like if they're listening to this, it's no surprise we talk about it still to this day. Like what a trippy time that was, and like and that was the norm of the high school I went to. Good old Mount Lawley High back in the day. It was crazy, you know, a lot of gang behavior, a lot of just grungy, crazy behavior. The smoking group on the oval was the biggest group on the oval, and there's a cloud of smoke above it, and it was all in plain sight.
Yeah.
Yet that kind of behavior, I don't think it would be accepted now. You know, I really don't. But it was. I mean, I was even caught with like a joint hanging out of my pocket. No, I was caught smoking weed in the toilets by a teacher, and it was blatantly obvious. I smelt like it. He caught me, and it just didn't do anything, you know. So it was all in plain sight. It's not like I was actively hiding it. It just felt like a different time, you know.
Yeah. Being a kid, especially that young, going through, I guess, that severe anxiety experience, where you're like literally vomiting quite frequently. Do you have an understanding of how that come about in someone so young? Now
I do, with like the understanding of the nervous system and yoga, like the gut. Like we all know the feeling when we've got knots in our gut, you know? Yeah. When we're nervous about something, anxious about it, we feel it in our gut. And it was really just that at a really intense level, you know, and the gut just churning and not having any tools to manage it. And a lot of kids get medicated now to manage it, you know, that's one way, but I think a shitty way. And so it was unattended to, so it was just like, and I know that feeling, and it's right in here, this nervous system clenching. And just didn't have any capacity to deal with it. My diet was shit. Like I was just a sugared up kid. So like the yo-yoing from like being sugared up to the max with my 10 Wheat Bix and Fruit Loops and just tablespoons of white sugar in the morning, and then be like not having any capacity, any like concentration. I thought I had ADD. I wanted to be diagnosed with ADD because I was just like, I can't focus. I'm constantly like hungry and yo-yoing. I think it was partially the sugar thing too.
Yeah.
Just sugared up like crazy. I wouldn't have that much sugar in like a week, what I had for breakfast then. So I do have an understanding of it now. I think, poor diet, no tools to manage the stress, no kind of conversation around it. And I thought I was a freak. I thought I was the only one going through it. So just wasn't comfortable talking about it. So I just abort mission when it was happening. I just I wouldn't go to school a lot. I'd just tell my parents I was sick, and they're softies, so they just let me have all these sick days. So I didn't go to school a lot, and then I wagged school a lot, and regularly would abort and go to the toilet and just be either like crying or vomiting. Like it was pretty bad. It was really not comfortable,
Yeah.
But there was something in it that was birthing this kind of clarity that I have around it now,
That's amazing. It's a hard position to be in as a kid, not understanding what's happening to you. And like you said, you just wanted to be diagnosed with this to have some sort of explanation as to like why you felt the way you did. It's a hard spot to be in. Did you find it hard to fit in at all as someone experiencing that?
That's the weird thing, because I was one of the popular kids. I was one of I did good at sport. Like on the exterior, like it wouldn't have looked like there was any reason to be anxious. Really, that's what's bizarre. I didn't feel smart. I felt like really stupid. That was part of it. Like, just can't pay attention. You just can't pay attention. And that was the main thing. But I did fit in. Had lots of friends. It was just the learning thing. Like, I hated my teachers. Like, I remember like dreaming of like, and I've heard other people talk about a similar situation. I thought I was crazy at the time of like dreaming, like, fuck, I hope my teacher like has a heart attack and dies. Like,
wow.
Literally thinking that. And like, because I just hated the teacher. Just thought they were the devil. And like,
Is that for picking on you because of that?
Yeah, I mean, looking back, there were a few teachers that I think were pretty shitty teachers, like really making me feel like crap for not knowing the right. Like, had some good teachers, but for the most part, a lot of the teachers were pretty crap. So I was just like, fuck, I hope they just like die, which is horrible to admit. But since hearing a few other people that are healthy, sane people admit that they had similar daydreams of like, fuck, I hope the teacher dies, or like even to the point where I hope the school bus rolls over so we can't go to school, and everyone like, we can't go to school.
Oh my God.
Shit like that. Like, I hated teachers. I hated the learning experience. So it was really strange because I enjoyed friendship. I was very social. Wasn't awkward in that way at all. I don't think. Can't think of it. But the learning situation was just not enjoyable at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I guess you've nearly overdosed, you've locked yourself in this room, you said you've gone into this depressed state. Do you remember the story you were telling yourself about what was happening to you and what you were feeling?
No, not really. It was kind of like, now that I've familiarized with like deep meditation states, as what like Buddhists would refer to as the void, it felt like, I mean, at the time, it felt like emptiness, just like empty, nothing. Nothing. Just like, so it was a depressed state, but looking back, it was this kind of empty, clean slate, and that's where the inspiration came in. But at the time, no, it was just like nothing. Like, on the verge of like I don't give a crap if I die, you know? Like, it was just that empty, that detached from my human experience. It didn't get to the suicidal point, but was pretty close to like, I just don't give a shit if I live or die. Just there wasn't the inspiration yet. It was just like darkness, just void.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was there any guilt and shame in that at all?
Nah, void.
Just nothing.
Nothing.
Wow.
Yeah. Nothing.
That's profound, especially that young.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I'd kind of gotten used to that through getting so stoned. Like, just, there's no need to smoke that much. You know, just like, okay, you're high, awesome, but then like we just keep smoking until like, nothing. You know, so I kind of got used to that. So I just, it wasn't really a dramatic time. There wasn't shame. There wasn't even really like tears of depression. It was just like, yeah, really strange.
Wow.
Yeah.
As a kid who hated learning, who hated that, I guess, education system and being a part of it, being in your room, finding Tony Robbins, Dr. Wayne Dyer, do you feel like that was a transition period for you to learn in your own time and space
Totally,
to then
man.
reintegrate?
Yeah, big time. I got the nutrition piece down, that was huge. Had the kind of spiritual influence of Wayne Dyer, and then the kind of motivation of Tony Robbins. Again, I went back to school, was a different person, started enjoying learning, started enjoying being wrong, which was completely new to me. Like, a lot of the anxiety prior to that was this huge fear, like, of being wrong,
Yeah.
of not getting the answers right, of feeling like I was the only one that didn't know the answer, so I would never like put my hand up like I don't know. All of a sudden, like, I just became really comfortable with like not knowing, wanting to learn, and it just became a real joy. Like, I loved being at school. I loved listening to the teachers. My perception of that whole experience totally shifted. Yeah, so it took a while.
Yeah.
It took a while to finally get out of that dark room and just go for it. So the integration process, I guess, looking back, it was very quick, but it was a gradual, at the time, it was a gradual thing. It was a gradual thing of just building up the strength, the vitality, the confidence to just go for it. But once I did, there was this kind of momentum and vitality that was really strong. Yeah.
Do you have an understanding of how specifically you transition from someone who was worried about being wrong, was worried about being in that environment, who was anxious, into someone who accepted themselves so much that they didn't care what people thought? Because for most people, that's probably an issue.
Yeah. So what's the question? I'll just try and be a bit clear with it. So
No, that's right.
Yeah.
It's how did you go from someone who was anxious and worried about what people thought to then going back to school as someone
Right.
who didn't care what anyone thought of you?
yeah, I mean, for me, it did, like I touched upon, it felt like a rebirth. So it literally felt like that old me that used to be so self-conscious and insecure and anxious had died. Like, I literally felt like a new person. So advice to create that, one's got to get really responsible and like take accountability, you know? Like, because we can't, I mean, we can hit rock bottom, but we don't need to. We don't need to. I think there's a presumption that, okay, Stu like hit rock bottom when he was 15 and came back inspired. A lot of people don't hit rock bottom, and they're kind of just humming in this kind of mediocrity, kind of complacency, middle ground of not fully being inspired yet not being at rock bottom, you know. So, which is fine. It can just not give people the excuse, but like leave people uninspired, unmotivated to just go for it and like just go for it in life and give up old stories and all that. So one's got to be really accountable and just take responsibility for their life and seek out the tools, seek out the conversations, ask for help. And for me, having a practice, having a daily practice of checking in. Am I being honest with like my life, and am I being grateful? And if I'm not being grateful, like am I facing my shit? So one can't like intentionally bring in that kind of hitting of rock bottom. That kind of thing's spontaneous.
Yeah.
That's this kind of fierce grace that happens for many of us, Many people that have near-death experiences express that, but a lot of people that have near-death experiences, it doesn't have that effect. Or just a really fierce like breakup could be the impetus to like wake someone up and go, all right, fuck, like had my heart broken and it sucks. But for some people, that catapults them into inspiration and giving up old patterns and old behaviors. For some people, that gets them in a rut for their whole life, So it's different for everyone. It's so different for everyone. So like, in terms of advice, that's why I love like one-on-one with people. Like a lot of my yoga teaching and that I do one-on-one, because everyone's so individual and like.
Yeah.
For one person, a shitty situation could be inspiration. For another, it just puts them in a deep, dark hole. And you've got to be specific to that person, Some people need a Tony Robbins style motivation to get some momentum in their life. Some people need to go on a Vipassana, like 10-day silent meditation to get really quiet and connected to what's true. Some people need to go to an ecstatic dance and dance like crazy. Like, everyone's different, and some people need to see a therapist, or there's so many variables. So I think one needs to tune in to like where they're at, give up like denial. That's a big one, like just very common for us men as well. Like just sweep all our shitty habits under the kind of rug of denial, so to speak, and just cover it up with alcohol and, boozy weekends and talking about sport, which is all well and good, but often can really just cover crappy patterns and self-sabotaging patterns. So like vulnerable conversations like what you're doing, and just getting honest with our hang-ups and our addictions and where we're self-sabotaging. And whatever we're feeling could help us at that time, just diving in and going for it, And we're not the only one. There's a whole movement around it now. It's becoming way more talked about, way more acceptable, way more supported. So it's an exciting time in that way,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Man. It's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Last question about that part of the story before we move on.
Yeah.
I know you said there was a void, but was there ever any hint that you can think of, I guess, what am I doing with my life? How did I get to this point where I nearly overdosed?
Mm-hmm. Like looking back from now, or at the time was inquiring into
looking
that?
back now, can you see any hints of that?
I mean, I'm grateful for it now. Like it was crap, but looking back now, 20-something years, I'm grateful for that, It shook me to my core. It, I think, expanded my mind and made me be more empathetic and compassionate and grateful. And I mean, a lot of friends that really didn't kind of hit rock bottom during that phase kept taking drugs, and some ended up in jail. Some ended up dead. Rest in peace. Blessings to them and their family. And for a lot of them, it just continued on. And didn't have the blessings in it that I experienced. So I'm looking back at it. I'm grateful. At the same time, I know it's not healthy, and like having 2 kids, and my wife went pretty hard as well. So we're like, we know it, all the signs and symptoms, and I would not wish it upon my kids to go through that. At the same time, it was such a valuable part of like my growth and development in such a strange way, a mysterious way, that you can't plan on it and you don't want it. But my teacher Ram Dass calls it like fierce grace. It's not like beautiful grace and all fluffy and lovey, but it was this kind of fierce grace of like, okay, you nearly fucking died and you feel like shit. Now what are you going to do? Like, you're alive, you got this body, like, come on, like, wake up. Don't take life for granted, and bring in some joy and some inspiration. So I'm grateful for it, really.
That's awesome.
It was a huge, and even the party times, like, it was fun. Like, the reason I kept doing it, it was fun. I was having threesomes at 13 and 14 and 15. I was having a great time. And after that, I haven't felt the need to party. Like, I just went so hard that I just don't feel the need. I don't feel the need to get high, get drunk. Like, every now and then I'll have a few drinks now. There's just such moderation around it. And I feel so good now. Even when I do have a few, it doesn't feel as good as just being like playing with my kids, or going for a surf, or doing some yoga, or like just being alive, So it really kicked my ass into having this kind of balance post that,
Do you feel like being someone now who enjoys playing with their kids more than that feeling of being drunk or taking drugs is due to having worked through or processed a lot of the stuff that you were trying to escape with alcohol and drugs?
Yeah, I mean, it was a continuum. I mean, again, deep gratitude to the yoga practice, which continues to release and like burn up things like selfishness and being distracted. We're also distracted with our phones and technology, and there's just countless distractions now. So it served a purpose in that, and then it's been a continuous process for sure. Like every daily practice helps me continue to quiet the mind and cultivate gratitude and connection, and then I'm more present for them, and then can go back to the practice again and just keep transforming, continue.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Let's fast forward to the next part of your story. Walk us through that one.
Yeah. So after that, after high school, I went straight into getting a certification for personal training, which was great, and I was just loving it. I was becoming like self-sufficient and like quite successful with it, and again continuing the kind of health and fitness thing, which I was becoming just quite experienced with, and ended up kind of running my own business in a way at quite a young age, and it was a great experience, and even during that, it was really cool being one-on-one with all these really successful people that I was looking up to, like CFOs and entrepreneurs and just people rolling in cash, and because generally it's people that have enough money to spend on a personal trainer, get a personal trainer, and I was in Subiaco, and it was just that type of clientele. And I grew up in a kind of scene of like idolizing the wealthy, you know?
Yeah.
Idolizing the wealthy and aspiring, not even aspiring, like it was out of our reach, you know? It was them, like they're God, the rich and famous are God. And then all of a sudden I'm surrounded by them, you know, and even quite well-known people, and just seeing that most of them weren't happy and were seeking this kind of joy and happiness that they weren't. I had this preconceived notion that they must be.
Yeah.
They're beautiful looking and they've got all this money, but they weren't. So I was going through the personal training thing, which was great, and getting to know people really deeply, like getting to know the human experience, and holy shit, these people aren't actually happy. And then just kept going down that road, and I was also witnessing all the personal trainers, not all, but a lot, looking very healthy and fit, but taking all these monster drinks galore and tubs of diet yogurt that was just protein and artificial sweeteners, and just really like some of the most unhealthy people, but they were ripped and shredded and like all that, the superficial qualities of health and fitness. But so that was starting to magnify the gaps in the health and fitness realm. And I was over caffeinating as well, just kind of in that game. And during that time, I took off on a trip and lived in Canada for a few years. And I saw in Toronto, and I saw it even another level there, like people were just working from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. and just caffeine and working hard, playing hard, like big time. And the drugs thing came into my scene again. I was like, all the personal trainers that I was becoming friends with were all partying so hard. And I actually did go into it for a bit there. I did. There was like, I'd had about 10 plus years off the booze and off the drugs, and then just kind of slid back into it a bit. Nowhere near like what I did as a teenager, but it was around again. And I felt more aware and tuned in. And I was starting to feel like, with all the caffeine and the occasional partying, this chronic fatigue building up. And it got really bad, actually. This adrenal fatigue, chronic fatigue, just started to build up this kind of depressive state again that got really bad. And I got to a point again where just depressed and fatigued, and took a whole bunch of time off work. I was in a long-term relationship. I just left her, took off on this trip to Greece, and partied like crazy for a week, and just got really sick, like coughing constantly, chronically fatigued. Like I was just stupid. It's like I was trying to hit rock bottom again, like unconsciously, like trying to create another kind of rock bottom, because that's what happened. Like I was trying to just have fun and go on this trip with the guys and celebrate life, but I was doing it in such a stupid way, and I knew I was done with that.
Yep.
It's like I brought it in for one last like hurrah of like, come on, you had so much fun with it back in the day. Like, just they're all doing it. All the personal trainers are doing it. Your boys are doing it. Like, just do it. I just got really sick. Like, again, felt like I was going to die from this cough. I think it was we're in EOS, and people were calling it the EOS cough. Everyone had this fucking cough. No. And I just kept going harder and harder, even though I had this cough. And we just kept traveling around and partying, and this cough just got worse and worse and worse. Ended up finally flying back home. Same spot I was in at 15, just in my room, in this dark cave again. And that's where yoga, I was dabbling in yoga prior to that. And that's where yoga just exploded into my life. I'm like, oh, this is what I need to fill in all those gaps that I was finding in the health and fitness industry. Because I'd I'd become successful in it. I was doing what everyone else was doing in the scene at the time. I don't know what it's like now. I'm not really in it. And again, I kind of unconsciously created the burnout again. I partied even though I was done with it. I wasn't even having fun with it. It was just like, it was really strange. Looking back on it, it was just completely either unconscious or a conscious attempt to just get everything to bottom out again. It was really weird.
But that just happens though, especially, like I see this a lot with people who use negativity from others to fuel their achievements.
Right.
What I say to them is like, if you're taking that negativity and using it as fuel, once you achieve, you're going to look for that sort of negativity again, so you're just always going to be attracting that.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it's the same for you. You needed that negative motivator to get back into that position.
Yeah.
How did you feel being back there? Was there any judgment towards yourself for being back in that room and feeling the same? After being someone who'd gone through the PT scene and been working with wealthy clients?
Yeah, there actually was, because I knew better. And I was feeling so good. So it was this stupid self-sabotage. It really was, because I knew better. So there actually was a bit more shame around it and self-judgment, because I knew better.
Yeah.
At the same time, I just did it. And I knew I had to end this long-term relationship. I was trying to exit that, didn't know how to, didn't really have the balls to do it consciously. So I just fucked myself up and wrote myself off. And again, it had blessings in disguise in it. Even though it was so unconscious and so stupid, there I was again in this kind of cave of darkness. And the revelations of yoga just were blatantly obvious. I started really... Again, I was dabbling in yoga, like I was doing like a power yoga type thing because I was just obsessed with power at that time, just getting strong and powerful and just that whole thing. So I was doing vinyasa, power vinyasa yoga, which is good, all for it, but for me, I needed something soothing and nourishing and quietening. I didn't need more power and more sweat. I needed to slow the fuck down and pay attention. So in that dark cave, the deeper aspects of yoga started blossoming. And I started really studying it and going deep with the yoga practice. So that was the next chapter of like just burning out the whole PT thing, taking that just to the edge. And it was a good time. Like I got to know the body really well. I got to know nutrition really well. I got to know people really well, of like the shadows of people and this aspiring for material success and superficial perfection. At the same time, no one being happy. And everyone was just looking forward to the weekend to get fucked up. And I was just like, I bought into it for a bit. And it just got really magnified, like that whole game, that how seductive it is, And it just became clear as daylight, like, okay, I'm fully done with it, like, and that was the next chapter of just going so deep into the gems of yoga. And that's really continued on to this day, like a continuous unfoldment of further releasing old limiting stuff and allowing my true potential to keep expanding. And that's where we're at now,
That's beautiful, man.
Yeah.
One last question about that story. You touched on, I think you said didn't have the balls to break up with your partner at the time. Mm-hmm. Were you a pleaser at all?
Oh, totally, man. Totally. Yeah, I mean, and that stems all the way back to not wanting to be wrong.
Wow.
Like, I didn't want to be wrong because I wanted to please the teacher. So weird.
Please the teachers that you didn't like.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's been a huge theme in my life, and it's still there. I can see it in me now. It's just much more faint. I'm much more aware of it. But it definitely runs deep in my family. That deep conditioning of like being a people pleaser and not having trouble having those tougher conversations, like a breakup conversation. Just couldn't have it. And instead, just wanted to please, but then run away and just make it worse, you know?
Yeah.
It just gets worse. Rather than just like looking at the issue head on and facing it, you know? So totally a people pleaser thing. Yeah.
How, I guess for anyone who has heard of yoga, because most people would have, someone who's heard of yoga, who's considering it but isn't too sure what to expect from it, how would you, I guess, describe it to them and the benefits that they'll receive from yoga?
Yeah, well, for starters, there's so many different, you could say, flavors of yoga. You could say the most like popularized and available type of yoga would be vinyasa flow or hot yoga, which is good, but it's not for me.
Yeah.
Like I did that aspect of movement and physicality. I did that, and it had benefits for me. But for me, like my approach to yoga, the way I teach, the way I practice, is more working with the breath. It's working with the body, moving the body, and addressing any accumulated like tightness or weakness or stagnation, and moving the body intelligently and holistically. That's good, learning to move the body intelligently. Because a lot of us like, you know, think of like running on a treadmill or pounding the pavement. It's a very linear movement, you know, which is good, but you do it again and again and again, and imbalances can arise. So the beautiful thing about a good, smart yoga practice, asana, like the movements are called asanas, is it moves the body in a very holistic way. The front of the body moves, the back of the body moves, you're twisting, you're laterally, like you're moving it in every direction, which can really help address a lot of the imbalances we can accumulate in our body just from sitting too much. Stretch the hip flexors, open the chest. That is good. But what I get more interested in is working with the breath and the mind, because our breathing patterns go in correlation with the mind.
Yeah.
So if we're breathing really, like most of us are breathing like, you know, like 1/16 of a proper breath, tiny, and we wonder why we can't pay attention, you know. So like relearning how to breathe properly, and as soon as we can relearn and integrate how to breathe properly, we've got more mastery of what we do with our mind. So that's what I'm way more interested in, is like relearning harmonious patterns of breathing to help unblock old patterns, like old psychological patterns. That's a big part of it as well. So like, for example, being a people pleaser or any kind of pattern that's like deeply seated in our psyche. In yoga, that's called a samskara. It's like a groove in the mind that forms like an addiction. We're like, we want to change, but we're addicted to a way of being. So we address that addiction, and we put breath into it, and we put like mantra in sound, like making therapeutic sound is a powerful way to do it. So what to expect? That's a wide menu, you know. It depends what class you walk into. It could be a sweaty, sexy, just pumping class with loud music on. I mean, there's everything now, from hip-hop yoga to beer. There's so much. And,
Yoga with goats.
Yeah, the yoga with goats. So, you know, I for a while there, I was kind of judgmental of a lot of these kind of newer, fatty types of yoga arising, but I've kind of relaxed on my stance on a lot of these fad things that are popping up in yoga, because, you know, it's getting a lot of people into the body, into working with the breath, into the yoga experience that just wouldn't otherwise. Like the way I teach definitely isn't for everyone. Like some people just wouldn't want to do that on their Saturday, Sunday afternoon, you know, because some people, aren't ready to face like getting triggered, you know. 'Cause, like I'm kind of fierce in the way I teach. I'm like, okay, if you've got some shit you're dealing with, let's face it, you know. And it's done in a loving way, but kind of fierce. Like, if not now, when, you know? And it's like, let's just go for it. Let's just go deep and face our limiting patterns and put breath there and put movement there and put mantra there, and let's wake up like now, you know. So rather than it being like, let's just have fun and like move to music, which is great, but you can kind of go to the gym for that, you know. For me, the yoga is like, let's wake up now, you know, and let's open our hearts now, and let's burn up any bullshit that keeps like having us close our heart and having us chronically distracted. So for me, that's where it's at. Again, like we're so distracted in the modern day. It for me is an opportunity to really discharge all that distraction, get real, get present, and continue the awakening process, you know.
That's amazing. Vinyasa was one of the modalities that I feel saved my life while I was working a 4-in-1 roster. Luckily enough, we had yoga out there.
Oh, cool.
And so we were doing vinyasa every night, every morning, every night.
That's great.
And I feel like that was something that really aligned me with myself, maybe for the first time. Really calmed down the mind, allowed me to process how I was interacting with other people and how I was interacting with myself. So I've got a lot of respect for yoga practices.
Yeah, that's great to hear.
I think we've got about 10 minutes and I really want to cover everything that you're doing at the moment. Because it seems like you've got a lot on your plate.
Yeah. Everything I'm doing. Like what I'm offering in terms of like...
what you're offering in terms of services, you got a book out, you got a podcast.
Sure, yeah. So during most weeks, I do several like one-on-ones a day. I do private, so I enjoy, and this comes from like PT days of really enjoying working one-on-one. So I apply the yoga in a one-on-one environment, which I really enjoy.
I've never heard of that before.
Yeah. So people find it really helpful because we can personalize it, you know, and really get specific. And sometimes people just rock up and they're just talking, you know, kind of like almost like what you do going to see a therapist. And a lot of people just want to be heard, you know. A lot of people just want someone to listen and pay attention. So sometimes I'm just listening for an hour or two and just listening to someone. But more often than not, we'll bring in some yoga principles, again, working with the breath, working with therapeutic movement. And I love doing it in a one-on-one way. So that's a lot of what I do. I do like a workshop type thing every couple weeks when I'm in Fremantle. That's either at Spunda or at the yoga lab down the road, or I do it all over the place. I've got one coming up in 21st of September. That's in Wembley at Mind, Body, Heart. So I love them. That's like a 3-hour kind of journey. You know, it's a 3-hour journey giving us time to really not only have a wonderful, deep, heart-opening experience, but then working on ways to integrate it. And like, rather than it being like an escape, we can really sharpen our tools, so to speak, to help us bring it into every aspect of life, you know? So I'll do that every couple of weeks. My family and I, we travel quite a bit. So we're off on another trip early November back to California and Hawaii. So we spend a bit of time over there, which is really cool. And Mexico, we're developing like an advanced training for teachers. A lot of teachers have been reaching out that have done a teacher training or two, but they're interested in taking their yoga practice to a deeper place. So we're developing a training for that, for teachers that want to just take it into deeper places. What else is going? Yeah, the podcast, I'm loving that, you know. It's one of my most wonderful like practices. Again, it's one-on-one.
Yeah.
You get to hear people's stories and pick apart like you're doing, the tools that can really help people integrate these tools. And it's great to hear other people's stories and relate, It's really exciting, this whole podcast thing of like open, long conversation, to hear other people's stories and hear those journeys without the kind of script or just raw honesty. So I really love doing that as well. That's really cool.
Have you found much growth in the way that you connect with people through the podcast? Because
Yeah.
that's been the most profound thing for me. Is I was someone who never had the ability or could never force myself to keep eye contact, because where I'm from, if you make eye contact, that means you want to fight.
Yeah.
And so eye contact was very hard for me, and through podcasting I've learned to do that, and I've learned to actually listen,
Right.
because I was someone who always needed to talk about myself.
Yeah, totally. Same. The eye contact thing I had worked on prior, but it took it to another level doing the podcast. Like, it just took it to another level. I like to bring into my yoga workshops like long, silent, eye-gazing meditation.
Nice.
So it's like 20 minutes to half an hour. You're just sitting like closer than this, like knee to knee, like right there, just boo. And like, people go into some pretty trippy places, no script, nothing to talk about, like even this kind of back and forth, it's beautiful, but then like the silent gaps.
Yeah.
I love the silent gaps. Doesn't work so well in a podcast because what do you listen to, the silent gap? Let's just all meditate. But it challenges people in a beautiful way, challenges me, the eye contact thing as well. Yeah. My wife actually gave me shit when we first met because she found it almost too much how much eye contact I was giving her, like just wide open eye contact.
Like threatening.
Yeah. Kind of what you're talking about, like, do you want to fight or are you coming on to me or what's going on? And my comfort of silence, like she was like, yeah, you didn't talk much. You like seemed really blissful in the silence, and that was strange to her,
Yeah.
So I enjoy that, like just being able to be together without a beer or a phone or in our hands, without anything in our hands, without any kind of script, without anything to talk about. Can we just like hang out, I love that. And the open-eyed meditation for like 20 minutes or longer is an awesome practice for that I love. But yeah, the podcasting thing, the art of listening is a continuous refinement for me, not always needing to butt in and be preoccupied with my response, which is pretty common, I think.
Yeah.
Needing to like one up the other person's dialogue. Just listening. Listening is huge. Yeah.
That's awesome. Couple quick questions before we wrap up.
Yeah.
Knowing everything that you've been through so far, you've been through a lot, especially at 15 years old. What would you say the quality of your life is like now?
I'm so grateful, man. Life's so good. I'm really lucky. I've got 2 healthy, beautiful daughters, a beautiful wife, and I kind of pinch myself at that because prior to meeting Joe, I didn't think I was going to be a family man. I wasn't.
Wow.
Yeah, I didn't think I was. I had a couple after leaving that long-term relationship that I was telling you about earlier. I was like, yeah, I'm probably just going to be a single yogi for the rest of my life. And I was quite happy with that. I was quite content. And that would have been sweet, sure, beautiful. But I'm so glad I kind of did that inner work during those single few years there.
Yeah.
Of just being comfortable in my own skin, being okay with not having sex and not partying, like just being okay in like nothing, just like the ordinary stuff of life,
Yeah.
Being like content in the ordinariness of life was huge for me. And then when I met Joe, I was like, fuck, like we knew very quickly we were gonna make babies together. And I didn't see it coming. Didn't see it coming at all. I didn't put any intention into that. It was just came up in front of me, and I'm so grateful I was like receptive to it and like ready, Because now I feel like a really good husband, a really good dad. At the same time, I don't feel Like a lot of people say to me, like, don't you feel like it kind of confines your freedom, you know? Because that's pretty common in the yoga scene and the kind of spiritual scene, quote unquote, of like trying to create freedom from, you know, and having no ties, no responsibilities. And I get that, you know? And just like being in this position right now of having a shitload of responsibilities, yet feeling freer than I ever have, feels really beautiful and balanced. And it feels kind of like a balance of like the traditional, like family life, you know, the wife and the kids and that whole thing, which I really didn't see coming. At the same time, this kind of free-flowing, spontaneous life. So I'm really grateful, man. Life's so good. I'm healthy. The family's healthy. We're able to travel. There's a kind of spontaneity to our lives. Yeah, life's good, man.
That's beautiful. I guess to wrap up, I just want to acknowledge you first of all for making time to do this, knowing how much you've got on your plate. Secondly, for knowing everything that you've been through, taking that pain, turning it to purpose, using what you've learned throughout your yoga practice and using that to help others. I can't say just how grateful I am that you're in Perth doing what you're doing.
Likewise, brother. Yeah, love what you're doing as well. Good work.
Thank you, my man.
Yeah, good to be here. All the best.